What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So I've had the Boom eVader electric motorcycle for a few weeks now. And if you missed the first video where I unboxed this thing, assembled it, and took it out on its first couple of rides, I'll link that video on screen and down below for you guys to check out. But in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit more about my experience with the bike and also go over my thoughts on this bike being a good sort of beginner motorcycle for folks who maybe want to get into riding. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had friends and family hop on this thing, all of whom had absolutely no prior riding experience. And after seeing them ride it and hearing their thoughts, I think I can say without a doubt that this is going to be a really solid beginner motorcycle or first bike for a lot of different people. And by the way, if you're interested in learning more about this electric bike, this is from the folks over at Belmont Bikes. They actually have a huge selection of full-size motorcycles that get delivered right to your door. And I'll leave a link to their site down below in the video description for you to check out their inventory. They really have a pretty interesting selection of all sorts of motorcycles and power toys. So I've actually been riding motorcycles for a few years now myself. I'm no longer a beginner, but as I was making the transition from no motorcycle experience at all to trying to learn to ride an actual bike, I quickly realized that it's a much bigger jump than I had originally thought. I sort of wish that I had had something that was about the size of a motorcycle so that I could get the feel of everything, but that maybe wasn't as complicated as a four-limbed controlled manual bike. There's obviously no substitute to just learning how to ride a motorcycle. 99% of bikes are manual, and it's a fun and challenging yet really rewarding experience when you finally nail it all down. But getting a feel for the clutch, understanding how to change gears, and playing around with the front and rear brakes can all take away from just cruising on the open road. And I think the complicated nature of an actual motorcycle intimidates a lot of people. For one, it probably really discourages them, and also all the confusion, the mess of different controls, it can obviously be the cause of some unfortunate mishaps. And that's where a bike like this comes in. The Boom eVader is an all-electric 3/4 size eVader style motorcycle. It's really inexpensive compared to even the cheapest beginner street bikes. It's lightweight and smaller in size, which makes it easier to handle, and the fact that it is all electric means that any complicated controls are taken out of the equation, and a lot of the mechanical parts and pieces that need to be maintained on a regular bike aren't part of this bike either. So maintenance costs are way lower too. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had a few friends and family members ride this thing. All of them are first-time riders with no motorcycle experience whatsoever, and everyone I had ride this bike was basically able to hop on it and get going in a matter of seconds. That's just not something that's going to happen with any other regular motorcycle, and there are quite a few reasons for that. First off, like I mentioned already, the Boom eVader is a smaller sized bike. Now obviously it's no bicycle, but at well under 300 pounds, it's half the weight of even a 300cc street bike, which I feel like is most people's beginner bike choice. And for first-time riders, getting used to a bit more weight between the legs is important. But sitting on this bike, it doesn't feel like you're one light breeze away from tipping over and crushing your legs. You can stand upright over the bike, tilt it back and forth, and feel it out really easily. If it falls over, I think most people can pull it back up on their own. And most importantly, because it is so lightweight, it doesn't feel so intimidating. It's not difficult to maneuver, you feel more comfortable leaning into the turns, and I think it gives you more confidence and a better feeling of control. Because it is a smaller eVader style bike, it also means it's more of a one-size-fits-all setup. The seat height is about 30 inches, and even for a taller guy like myself, I fit comfortably on it, but especially for anyone under 6 feet tall, kids, teens, whoever else, you'll be able to rest both feet flat on the ground when you're squatting on the bike, which again, I think just makes things far more comfortable. Overall, the smaller size and lighter weight just makes the bike a lot easier to handle for a beginner, and I do think it's that missing step between no experience, or maybe like a bicycle, into full-size motorcycles. In addition to its size, the other advantage the Boom eVader has, like I said already, is the lack of any sort of manual controls. This is an all-electric bike, so it basically functions like a scooter. The only controls you have to worry about are the throttle and the brakes, and they're all on the handlebars. There's no foot controls to worry about at all. You've got your rear brakes on the left handlebar, and then a standard throttle control and front brake lever on the right bar. Of course, you have some other buttons and switches like your lights, blinker, and horn, but that's really all self-explanatory. The only other thing you'll see is actually a power mode switch with 3 options, and this controls your acceleration and max speed. You can start out on the lower setting if you want, but really, this isn't a bike that's going to take off on you. Even at max power, blipping the throttle only causes a little bit of movement, and even if you yank it all the way back, it's more of a subtle get up and go rather than anything that's intimidating. And I actually like this because if you just want to get a feel for it, you can rest your feet on the ground and play with the throttle for a minute to just see how much power you want to give it. On a regular motorcycle, your main concern is just trying not to stall, or worse, I guess trying not to dump the clutch and speed off into traffic. With this bike, you have a lot more opportunity to learn and to focus on riding the bike itself, rather than having to worry about anything else. And when you're out on the road, it's the same story. Rather than worrying about stalling at a stoplight, missing a shift, or some other problem, you're focused on the road. There's nothing you have to worry about aside from the throttle and the brakes, and it allows for a bit more freedom and comfort. This is especially important if you end up riding on unfamiliar roads, or you head into a turn too quickly, or you have any issues with the cars around you for whatever reason. Removing the complicated manual controls, I think, is beneficial for a first-time rider as they start to get more used to actually riding in traffic, being exposed to the road and to the cars around them, and generally just trying to get more comfortable with such a new experience. Now, interestingly enough, while this is technically a motorcycle, there are a couple of little quirks that I want to mention that make this bike a little different. Like you saw in my first video, the bike does get delivered right to your door, which is awesome, but there's some assembly required. If you can handle that, you skip all the hassle of a dealership or trying to buy a used bike from Craigslist, which is great. When you do receive this bike, it's going to come with a title and the proper documentation to get it registered at the DMV. It is obviously a full street legal bike, but because of its electric motor and lower overall power, some states may not even require that you have a motorcycle license to ride it. It's more of an electric scooter classification in that case. So I think that's pretty great too. It's a super low commitment sort of a purchase. There's no like hoops to jump through. In some places, there's really no requirements at all either. Just register it and ride it. I would say the only thing to consider with the Boom eVader is the slight limitation in speed. On one hand, the bike has no problem accelerating from a stop and keeping up with the flow of traffic. But unfortunately, the eVader has a max speed of around 40 miles an hour, which means you'll be limited to city streets, neighborhoods, and rural areas. This isn't a bike you can take out on the highway. And with a range of about 40 to 50 miles, you may want to double check your route to make sure you can get back with enough juice to spare. Fortunately, because it is an electric bike, all you need to do is plug it into a regular old power outlet to charge it. And like I said earlier, there's very little to maintain on the bike too, which is really nice. Not only is it inexpensive to buy up front, you're not really gonna have to do much to it in the long run either. Over the last couple of weeks, everyone I've had try the Boom eVader has had a wonderful time on the bike. Some of the more daring participants, like my sister, hopped on the bike and flew down the road at max speed in just a couple of minutes. And fortunately, there were no accidents to speak of either. Because of the way this bike is, it's really a hop on and ride sort of a setup. There's not a whole lot to think about. And I think that's one of the most appealing things that this bike offers for first-time riders. The Boom eVader, I think, is the perfect beginner bike for a few different people. It's certainly a good bike for folks who want to get into riding, but who maybe don't have anyone who can teach them. It's also for people who don't want to commit $2,000 or $3,000 on a full-size bike just yet. Having this bike instead and seeing how often you actually ride it, I think, is a better investment. And most of all, I think this is probably the missing step between no experience and hopping on an actual full-size manual motorcycle. It's a solid transitional bike for sure, but even for people who have been riding like myself, it's a fun alternative. And as an experienced rider, I've fully enjoyed riding this thing for the past few weeks too. So I know this is a little different than my usual content, but hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Let me know what you think of the Boom eVader electric bike in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. And let me know if you have any questions about the bike as well. I'd love to answer them or help out if I can. Also, be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys later.